Hello Internet, welcome to my channel.
I'm Chameleon X.
In today's video, in honor of Thanksgiving, I'm going to be talking about a somewhat unique idea you can incorporate into a TTRPG. Food. That is, an adventure centered around food, cooking, food mascots, and such. I've actually played in an adventure like this before. One of my friends,
Blood Rose Lord,
aka Dot, ran a campaign that was sort of like a combination of Has-Been Hotel and Shogeki no Soma. We started off in Hell's Kitchen, literally a kitchen in Hell, where Gordon Ramsay was the devil, and we had to win a cooking competition in order to be awarded lucrative corporate contracts, which was our ticket out of there. In our case, we eventually sided with PepsiCo, turning down an offer by Coca-Cola, in no small part because of my character's political leanings. You see, I played Chester del Fuego, a Tabaxi barbarian whose rage was fueled by the intense heat of flamin' hot Cheetos. In my backstory, I was the cousin of Chester Cheetah, and I was originally in the running to be the mascot for Flamin' Hot Cheetos, until the company decided to just stick with Chester. Despite this betrayal, I remained loyal to my PepsiCo roots. Because yes, the Cheetos brand is actually owned by Pepsi. I know that because I specifically looked it up for this character. My fiancée played the Warforged Druid B4K3R, an experimental sentient oven designed to bake and decorate cakes. Her life's mission was to seek out the finest recipes for baked goods in existence, and the wildfire spirit she could summon took the form of Buddy Velastro. My friend Vivian played Giovanni Mozzarella, a dwarf forge cleric who is a pizza chef, and her brother Wyatt played a carnivorous Harengon, who masqueraded as a human because Harengon were a delicacy in this world. This was a long time ago, and the adventure didn't last long before real life got in the way, so I don't really remember much about it. I do know our first mission was to guard a Pepsi truck. The shipments kept getting hijacked by thugs that we found out were probably working for Coke, and we pursued them into a sewer dungeon. Then there was something about a hotel run by rats who were laundering cheese, and my character ended up going on a wacky drug trip through the hallways after the rats slipped something into my food, and I went around banging on doors and just openly asking about the gang leader we were sent here to investigate. There was a bunch of stuff in between, but you get the idea. This presents one option for making a food-themed campaign, and probably the easiest to design. Just build a normal TTRPG adventure, but sub in food and drink brands in place of guilds, nobles, and other organizations in the world. You can also use food-themed equipment. For instance, as a weapon, my character started off using a pair of nuncheetos, a flail that was composed of 2 giant Cheeto puffs linked by a chain. As the quest progressed, I found a replacement weapon, a French baguette that was basically a flame-tongue greatsword. I didn't know at the time, but the weapon contained the spirit of the baker who created it, and every time I activated my rage while attuned to it, the spirit took me over and I would suddenly start talking in a thick French accent and being very judgmental about the quality of other people's food. My fiancé used a club that was basically a whisk, and Giovanni used a searing frying pan with a pizza tray as a shield. Taking this concept to the extreme, you could have armor made of pots and pans, buildings made of graham crackers, cheese, or hollowed-out gourds, or gigantic fast food containers. Basically like Sugar Rush from Wreck-It Ralph, only with less diabetes. The plus side of doing things this way is that you don't really need any special rules or subsystems. Most of the work is just reflavoring the mechanics. Obviously, this won't work for a game that is at all serious, as the zaniness of the setting is kind of the whole point. The fun comes from playing the Pillsbury Doughboy, beating a sushi monster to death with a beef jerky quarterstaff, and then getting rewarded with chocolate coins and an audience with the Burger King and his cousin, Duchess Wendy of White Castle. One option is closer to how the campaign began before it branched out into more standard adventuring. You could have an actual cooking competition, where the characters have to gather ingredients and prepare meals to impress important clients. If you wanted to build this out into a larger quest, perhaps the characters have to hunt down specific monsters that are delicacies, harvesting meat, special herbs and spices, or other ingredients needed to make a certain signature dish. Maybe the party can investigate the client they're trying to cook for and to discover the kind of food he likes, perhaps even getting their hands on an old family recipe that was thought lost forever. You can make the process as engaging as you like, but in the end, it would all come down to a series of ability checks using cook's utensils, assuming you're playing 5e, or the equivalent in some other system. The chef feat is a no-brainer for this kind of campaign. In fact, you might consider just giving every player that feat for free, just so everybody is starting out on equal footing. As for mechanics, I think it's a good opportunity to bring back a lost gem from 4th edition D&D, the Skill Challenge. A skill challenge is essentially an encounter where you use skill checks instead of attack rolls. Each player chooses one of their skills or tools with which they're proficient and describes how they're going to use that skill to overcome whatever obstacle the party is currently dealing with in the challenge. In the context of meal preparation, there's plenty of jobs that need to be done in order to make a gourmet meal. Chopping vegetables, cooking broth, adding seasoning, managing the heat, making sure that the food is browned but not burned, etc. Each of these has a fairly logical skill to go along with it. Sleight of hand, perception, maybe arcana if the dish involves using magic to enhance the meal's flavor, and so on. The complexity of the dishes being prepared can increase as the adventure goes on, and the party is asked to cook for higher-ranking clients with increasingly refined palates. The important part is that each task is accomplished by a different player on a team of chefs who make ability checks to perform their assigned role, with each of the successes adding to the group's overall progress. Every player is encouraged to contribute to the meal being prepared, so it's not just the one guy with the highest bonus that gets to shine. Anyway, the way the skill challenge pans out is that you set a DC and a challenge level that correlates to the number of successes needed to win. If the party as a whole gains that many successes before gaining 3 failures, they win the challenge, with the number of successes needed increasing by 1 per level of the challenge. The basic challenge is 3 successes before 3 failures, but you could go as high as 5, 6, 7, or however many successes you want, with the 3 failures to lose remaining constant. The general rule of thumb is to make sure everyone in the party gets a chance to make at least 1 check, so if you got more than 4 or 5 PCs, you might want to increase the difficulty a bit. You can also spice things up by adding complications into the process. Perhaps a rival team of chefs has sabotaged some of the ingredients, or one of the appliances they need to cook the meal isn't working. Maybe the smell of cooking food draws in a wandering monster, so some of the party has to fight it off without ruining the meal, while the others have to stick to their task to make sure they can finish the dish on time. If someone in the party fails their check pretty badly, they could ruin some of the ingredients and have to figure out how to improv a replacement in the limited time they have to finish the meal. Basically, if you've ever watched a TV cooking show, you know the kinds of things that can pop up during a hectic meal preparation that can throw a wrench in the process and add a surprising amount of drama, especially if the stakes are high. If you do have your party hunting monsters to harvest their parts, I would have some ideas ready for the kinds of meats, juices, and various other anatomical features that might have culinary purposes. You can do this by just scanning through the monster manual or your preferred bestiary and trying to compare them to real animals that are often used for food, or you could take advantage of one of the multiple third-party resources available that deal with foraging and harvesting creature parts. Granted, most of those are focused on equipment and magic items, but there's a few that focus on food, like the joy of monster cooking or the monster menu, and so on. You can find a bunch of other resources on the GM binder, or just take some inspiration from video game franchises like The Legend of Zelda or Monster Hunter, which include cooking using monster parts. In any case, for the customary free content for this video, I was going to come up with an actual adventure themed around food, but that turned out to be too much work to do in just a couple weeks. Really need to start preparing for these videos ahead of time. Anyway, instead of that, I'm giving you a bit of a grab bag of Thanksgiving-themed stuff for 5e D&D, many of them coming from that adventure I was going to do. So maybe look forward to that next Thanksgiving if I get a good response. First up is 3 subclasses themed around food: the Provisioner Artificer Specialty, the Primal Path of the Spicy Slayer, and the Were Turkey Sorcerer's Origin. The first one is definitely the most grounded of the 3, as it's literally just a sorcerer that focuses on cooking, kind of like a counterpart to the Alchemist, except good. Like the Alchemist, you gain the ability to imbue magical effects into consumable magic items, in this case food, which you can hand out to your party. The difference is that you can actually choose which effect goes into your food, and the effects actually scale with the level of the spell slot. You also get the standard tool proficiency and bonus spells, in this case obviously centered around food and fire damage, because oven. At 6th level, you get fire resistance, your cantrips gain a bit of fire damage, and you gain a bonus to the chef feat if you happen to have it. Which, why wouldn't you if you're playing the subclass? At 9th level, you hand out temp HP when you use Flash of Genius, and you get reliable talent on cooking checks. At 15th, you can cast Hero's Feast once per day for free. The Spicy Slayer Barbarian is, if you hadn't guessed, based on the character I was playing in the campaign I mentioned. I was actually a Totem Warrior, Wild Heart Barbarian, but this is essentially what I would have been had I had the option of homebrewing a subclass around my character concept. You fuel your rage by scarfing down huge fistfuls of spicy food and letting the heat flow through you. You gain a fiery charge attack and the ability to spit fire a few times per day. At 6th level, you gain fire resistance and a few other benefits to your fortitude, as tolerating the spicy food you eat has made you tougher. At 10th level, you can exhale a cloud of choking smoke laced with capsaicin dust, which basically works like the Stinking Cloud spell, but also deals fire damage. At 14th level, you gain a fiery aura and immunity to fire damage while you're raging, and your own fire damage ignores other creatures' resistance to fire damage and downgrades their fire immunity to resistance instead. Finally, the Were Turkey is the most obviously jokey subclass, but is actually surprisingly effective anyway. I tried to make all of this content useful enough that you can use it in a non-comical game by stripping out the food-based flavor and just using the mechanical chassis. This one, for instance, could work well for any kind of lycanthrope character, as you get the ability to transform into an animal hybrid that boosts your AC and hit points, gives you natural weapons and regeneration that can be shut down by silver weapons. You also can't cast spells with verbal components, as the only sound you can make is... You can, however, magically speak to turkeys and other galliforms like chickens, quails, pheasants, and peacocks. The reasoning behind the bonus spells list becomes more obvious with the 6th level feature, Cold Turkey, which gives you cold resistance, extra attack, and resistance to non-magical damage while in hybrid form. Naturally, as a lycanthrope, silver weapons cut through your resistance. At 14th level, you gain the ability to fly, and at 18th level, your hybrid form becomes large, and you can stay in it indefinitely, and your damage resistance becomes immunity instead. Though, again, you can still be harmed by silver weapons. As a side note, the whole cold theming wasn't just for the pun. There's also the little flavor text there about getting the curse from a certain Archfey that represents autumn, which is the gateway to winter, so there's an actual in-universe reason why cold and wind would be so prevalent in this subclass, but more about that bit later. The next section of the PDF contains a handful of magic items which are all food-themed, or just literally made out of food. These are largely ideas that I came up with from my scrapped Thunzkaving adventure that I mentioned earlier. I'm not going to go over each item here, but suffice it to say that all of them are pretty useful if I do say so myself, and I tried to make them as flavorful as I could while still keeping them relatively balanced. The last section contains a few monster stat blocks I threw together. The Turkezu is a demonic turkey that hunts in large numbers and can drive people mad with its ear-pitching gobbling noises. The Ghoulish Gobbler is an amalgamation of the reanimated corpses of multiple Thunzkaving turkeys that have been partially eaten and thrown in the garbage. The spirits of the slain birds, consumed with hatred and vengeance, magically gather the bones and uneaten meat into a hulking, turkey-shaped colossus bent on death and destruction. Anything the monster consumes is magically transformed into stuffing, which can spew out as a gross breath weapon. The Zombie Pilgrim and Indigenous Ghost are kind of a tongue-in-cheek reference to the origin of the holiday. You can portray these two monsters as bitterly opposed factions engaged in an endless war with each other that stretches even into undeath, or you could just toss them in as an unrelated Easter egg, or Thanksgiving egg, I guess. Speaking of which, the final stat block is a big one. Back in the Were Turkey subclass, you may have noticed the reference to Thunzkaving, the Herald of Winter, and father of all turkeys, Archfey of Autumn, and the bestower of the curse of the Were Turkey. Well, I just couldn't resist giving this guy a write-up, so I give you the avatar of Thunzkaving. It's a truly epic threat, complete with mythic actions and the ability to cast basically every cold spell in the game. I had fun making this guy a serious threat to a high-level party, so don't hesitate to throw them at your PCs and see how things go. Thunzkaving is a pitiless harbinger of winter who seeks only to spread his sphere of influence, and defeating him in battle, while not enough to destroy the essence of this internal being, might be able to end or at least lighten the grip of a terrible winter that might otherwise lead to famine and hardship for a multitude. Like Rime of the Frost Maiden, but instead of the BBG being a goat owl, it's a giant fairy turkey. Thunzkaving, as you might expect, appears as a Titan-sized turkey with feathers the color of autumn leaves. His eyes glow a frigid blue, and icy mist wreathes his form and issues from his mouth and nose at all times. Unlike mundane turkeys who can only fly in short bursts, Thunzkaving is a master of the winds and of the cold, and his great talons and crushing beak can rend the flesh and sinew from the bones of even the mightiest of mortal creatures. Though he cares nothing for mortals or their affairs, he is an Archfey, and might be bargained with if you can offer him something he values. Generally fine food and drink, or some great service in the favor of his children, the turkeys. Anyone who harms a turkey, however, earns his undying wrath, and there's almost nothing one can do to repay the insult. He values shiny baubles like coins, gems, and mirrors, not for their monetary value, but literally just because he likes to look at things that shine and catch the light, especially if he can see his own reflection in them. Though he does not care about the market value of his possessions, he is intelligent enough to know that mortals covet them, and he uses this knowledge to manipulate and bargain with outsiders in his realm of eternal autumn in the Feywild. Called the Autumnal Eyrie, Thunzkaving's domain is a thick forest of twisted, frost-covered trees, whipped by a continual wind that blows an infinite supply of colorful leaves through the air. The ground is absolutely covered in these leaves, with any paths through his realm completely covered over by detritus. The chill mist clinging to the ground and constant flurry of autumn leaves drifting through the air, not to mention the close tangle of grasping tree branches, makes his realm a claustrophobic and dismal environment, which isn't helped by the fact that it's illuminated only by a red-orange twilight sun that never fully rises above the horizon, only sinking further at night to give way to a cold, silvery moon. The Archfey himself keeps his lair in an absolutely enormous dead tree, surrounded by twisted vines and branches, and heaped with piles of dead leaves, stacked up so high they effectively serve as walls for his palace, with the only entrance being a massive gate guarded by his most fearsome of Fey servants. What do you think? It started off as a joke, but I really like what it turned into. In any case, that's all I've got for now. If you have any questions, comments, criticisms, or suggestions for future content, don't forget to leave them down below. If you like this kind of content, consider liking and subscribing to get more. If you don't like this kind of content, let me know what kind you would enjoy more. Until next time, I've been ChameleonX, wishing you a happy Thanksgiving.